Greetings, listeners. Howard and I spoke with a very special guest. He is a partner and chief brand officer of a prominent UK law firm. Today, we discussed his very personal passion for the law, his blue chip advertising background, and his journey to being invited to leadership and non-attorney ownership in a law firm. We discussed the challenges and strategies of changing client perception. We discussed the very real impact of AI and private capital on the business of law and the competitive landscape. Enjoy. Welcome, everyone, to the Future is Bright podcast. My name is Chris Batts and joined by my co-host, Howard Rosenberg. Howard and I are at the epicenter of law firm talent and strategic growth here in New York City. Howard is the partner and head of talent intelligence and acquisitions at Barrett's and Brunel, and I advise and facilitate corporate law firm mergers at Columbus Street. And today, we have a very exciting guest, Mr. Elliot Moss, partner and chief brand officer of Mishcon de Reya. Elliot, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, New York.
Elliot, if you wouldn't mind giving us a very brief understanding of what your role is today at the firm.
Sure. So I've been with Mishcon de Reya 16 years. I became a partner in 2017, I think, senior partner under the Legal Services Act. We are allowed to be owners of a business, I think, unlike in many other geographies, including the United States, although I think in a couple of states you are allowed it, but in your state you're not. The reason I was offered partnership and took it is because we believed that the skill set that I happened to provide was critical to the future growth of the business. And that skill set is underpinned by kind of 4 or 5 major areas which encompass the span of my role. And the roles are: bucket 1, I am the person who leads the charge on developing what's called a brand, which we can get into later. That manifests itself through marketing, paid for, not paid for, internal communications, external communications in general, the reputation of the business, the problems when there's pinch points with crises with clients or with our own business, and various things that we need to talk about externally. So that's bucket 1, brand. Bucket 2, client relationships, how we improve them, how we make them the best that they can be. We're a relationship-driven business. We are a plucky, slightly outside a litigation-led business in a sea of corporate-led practices in London. We're a top 30 firm, and those relationships are absolutely critical because 20% of our business every year is new business. So the rest, and that's a lot, and the rest we have to keep developing our clients. They are not as institutional, though we have many, not as institutional as some of the other big law firms. So client relationships and the primacy and being great at them is really important. And I lead the charge on that. We can get into that too. Bucket 3, I mentioned new business, client acquisition, the machine, the behaviors, all the metrics that we put in place, all the different ways that we articulate our difference, all critical. And I have a team of people, plus of course I've got 700 lawyers who are the team, and we have to work out how best to arm them with the right weapons and the right resources to go and win as much new business as we possibly can from both new clients and existing clients. Bucket 4, if my maths is right, intermediary relationships. Most law firms are based on really strong third parties saying, hey, we want to work with you, and making sure that we manage those relationships in the same way that we do our clients, with the same seriousness, the same intent, the same respect. That's another part of it. And I have a team that works closely with the lawyers to manage at any given time the top 120 intermediaries across our business. And there are obviously hundreds of them, but we track, we push, we work out how to make them more institutional, more long-term, and so on and so forth. That's the kind of official stuff. There's product development, there's pricing, there's positioning of every practice area to make it fit for purpose. When we open internationally, I'm involved deeply in terms of how we build that practice and how we integrate that practice across the firm. There's a troubleshooting kind of, I wish I was George Clooney, but that George Clooney role of the fixer, and I forget the name of the movie, but someone said, you're George Clooney. I said, I wish I was George Clooney. I'm almost as short as him, but not quite. But that sense of stuff in between the cracks, at the edges of what we do internally, where it isn't clear who might help, I get involved a lot, whether it's on the operational side. It might even be with the technology team or the R&C team. It might also be with a client, a myriad of things that come from my background, which is I spent 16 years in advertising, the first 12 at Leo Burnett, the big US Chicago-based behemoth of an agency, and my first 2 clients in the world were Kellogg's and Kraft. So I come from, my background is a blue chip marketing background. And I suppose the big thesis is, can you take FMCG and blue chip marketing capability and apply it to a professional service firm? And what the impact would of that be? And I joined the business in 2009. We were 45 million with a decent profit. And now we're a 380 million business with a much more decent profit. So I suppose the answer could be on simple level, yes, it might just be working.
Elliot, how did you get on the radar screen at Mishcon de Reya? Did they know you or did you know them?
I came with bags of cash, Howard, and I said, employ me. I didn't do that. Someone trained me, an organizational psychologist, actually worked with me at Leo Burnett in 2000 on team building. We stayed in touch. I became managing director and a shareholder in an independent agency post Leo Burnett after 12 years. I then said, come and help us. I really like the way you train. And then he said to me a couple of years in, actually, I'd like you to meet my managing partner. We've got a partner conference coming up. They want to talk about brand. I think you're the right guy. I meet Kevin Gold, then the exec, he was the managing partner, then he's now chair. And I met them there and I had a dress rehearsal without knowing it. I talked about the value of brand, or rather the value of values. And I basically told partners in 2007 in a beautiful Oxfordshire country home, I said, you just say everything that everyone else says. It's all generic rubbish. So that's all well and good, but be aware that that is what's happening here. What do your behaviors really look like? What would a brand really be? What could it be? And then 2 years I've worked with them on their brand strategy and some advertising. They said, Kevin Gold said to me, it would be great if you came here and helped be part of the management team of this business. That's how it happened.
Elliot, let's dig into that a little bit. So you were very honest about what they're doing and what they're not doing or should be doing. Can you shed light to my audience without giving away any secret sauce about why law firms are somehow just plain vanilla and you guys have changed the game, or applying your approach to it? Like that difference between branding, because if I understand correctly, branding has to do with differentiation. So help educate our audience a little bit.
So when I met them then, their strapline, if there was one, was not just any law firm. And I said to them, and that wasn't the focus of the presentation, the focus was on values and then I suppose how that relates to brand. And I said, not like any other law firm, well, what are you like? Differentiation is about calling out what you are, not what you're not. So in simple terms, the challenge of differentiation in professional services is to actually find your point of difference, which is substantively true as it relates to what you do for your clients, and is substantively true as it relates to the vibe in the firm, i.e. culture. That's it. Differentiation is the only word. If I was writing a book on this stuff, it would say there's one page. It's like a diet, eat less. It's like different, brand, be different, but find your difference and articulate it and then amplify it. And really, that's been the journey. I have been given the keys to the Mishcon de Reya house, which I take incredibly seriously. And the key is to what's on the front door and what is truthful about what's behind the front door. And so generally in professional services, the reason why it drifts into generic stuff is A, you don't have marketing professionals, brand professionals in the business. You have lawyers who are fabulous at contracts and fabulous in a courtroom and everything in between, but they're not brought up nor understand the nature of differentiation. That isn't the point. Advocacy, yes, lawyers are brilliant advocates, but not in the context of what it takes to be different and where words really make a difference. So I suppose that was the big difference, and it's still the difference. Most professional service firms don't work out what makes them, how they articulate their difference in non-cliche generic ways. The number of times you see the word collaboration on a website, the number of times you see intelligent, hardworking, committed. I mean, it's just banal. And it's banal not because people don't care, but because they haven't employed the right people and then trusted them in the way you would trust a forensic accountant or you would trust a wealth manager to go and do your thing. That's been the major difference, the major innovation, if you like, that we have continued to double down on. And then it's a question of investment appetite. If you then have something to say which is different and you're trusted to amplify that, you can start to actually change the perception of the firm. And we have changed the perception of Mishcon de Reya.
So how long did it take to get to different for you? Because you have to articulate that, then you have to convince your partners and your colleagues. That's a journey. Like, walk us through what that was like.
It wasn't that long, actually, Howard, because I had right on my side. I knew what I was doing. We had a proper structure, a process. I was an external person at that stage. So what that was like was about 4 weeks of deep dive strategy, looking at in the same way that Porter would look at five forces. You look at all the stuff in the market. What are other people doing and saying? What's your economic engine? What drives it? What do your own people say? What do your clients say? Put the things together. You start to find a story. And in our case, the story was, this is an unusual law firm where people are quite maverick and entrepreneurial, but they're also super intelligent. I mean, that's not surprising for a law firm, but the way we talked about it was, more IQ per square foot here, and enlightened in the sense of being progressive, a very progressive set of values, which doesn't play well in today's America, or indeed in many countries across Europe, but a very progressive set of values coupled with what we call the category driver. And the category driver is, in other words, what does a client of a law firm want? A client of a law firm wants their lawyer, whoever their lawyer is, and whatever discipline, to fight for them, to be tenacious. So tenacity, we talked about, is the emotional driver of any client in any law firm anywhere in the world. You come in because you need a result, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a piece of M&A, whether it's a litigation, whatever, you come in for a result. Our spin on that was, we are different. We have this weird allyship of progressive values and a sense of intellect. And then what we said was, and this was the one layer on top, Howard, actually people think we're a law firm for the private client world, but no, 90% of what we do is in the world of business. I presented all those things in a longer version of that to all the partners, and it took 3 meetings in 1 week, and everyone said yes. It's business, but it's personal. Articulation of it was just simply something that I then launched when I joined, and then we started to amplify it. So it wasn't arduous, because I argued it really well. I argued it just as well, I hope, as any lawyer would have argued for their client. I advocated, and my client was Mishcon de Reya, and I helped everyone believe that whoever they were in the firm, this would benefit them. So it wasn't a long journey, but I suppose I was relatively different because I had a deep skill set, and my insight, and someone gave this to me, a coach, actually, not my coach, but someone who coached a lot of lawyers. They said, Elliot, there's an insight you should be aware of in the legal community. And the insight is the following: lawyers trust experts. Right. They trust experts. When they think you're an expert, they will do anything, whatever type of expert. You know that. Lawyers are unbelievably gullible on one level, considering how clever they are. But actually, that's one side of it. The other side of it is, if they really believe you know what you're talking about, they will follow you. And that's what happened. And I don't mean that, it's not about me being so great. It's about me having a really good answer with a really good argument, and repeating the argument. A lot of communications, a lot of strategy is about repetition. Nothing lands. It's like politics. When you're bored of your message as a politician, you know the electorate's starting to hear it. And that's exactly how it works. And every day of every year I've been at Mishcon de Reya, I have fought armed combat, street-to-street combat, protecting ideas, where I'm driving differentiation for every practice. We have 40 practices. There isn't one homogenous thing that binds Mishcon de Reya, apart from it's business, but it's personal, which is an ethos, which says whether you're a client who's a private client or a business, you'll always get someone who's got skin in the game. That works for the real estate practice. It works for the IP practice. It works for employment. You have to find that. When everyone goes, oh, hold on a second, intellectually I buy it and emotionally I buy it, you're okay. But every day, a bit like my first American boss told me, you have to keep the ideas sold. And you have to, every time. This doesn't just happen in a business of our size, and it doesn't happen in professional services, because so many of our partners are so brilliantly articulate and so clever, and they will try and do what they think is right. And my job is to defend what's right, really, for the whole firm.
What was the attraction to go into kind of the branding world for you professionally?
So, funnily enough, I was going to be a lawyer, Howard. I was actually going to do law at Oxford, jurisprudence. And I had a bad day in the office. I did not have a good interview. I got caught up on a principle called parliamentary sovereignty. And the irony is, Ripple dissolved to our Article 50 case against the British government, which was all about, does Parliament need a vote? Does the legislature need a vote on what has been a referendum about leaving Europe? And the answer was yes, it does. And that's all about parliamentary sovereignty, which is kind of funny, because then you become one of the 10 leading experts in the UK on the principle that didn't get me into Oxford. But the reason I mention that is I always wanted to be in the law. Three things that emerged at university were either the music industry, journalism, and then my girlfriend at the time, who became my first wife, was saying advertising. I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. And I think in my blood, I'd always been a communicator. I'd always been the person putting together well, if you want to say that, here's how you might say it. So it wasn't so much brand. It was interesting. It was the world of ideas. I had friends going into the city or into property. I couldn't think of anything more boring. I like the primacy of ideas. If you think about your own purpose in life, which is always a weird thing, you shouldn't do that in your midlife period. You go, what is my purpose? I've got no purpose. I'm just feeding my children. But my purpose is, I think, to create and nurture brilliant ideas, to help people come to amazing ideas, because at the end of the day, as a species, what else have we got? And so that's how I got drawn to it. And then you learn your craft. And I was taught by great people, great clients. Procter & Gamble was my biggest client for 10 years. I worked with them across Asia, across Latin America. And you just get into it, Howard. And it's business. It's where business meets and commerciality meets ideas. That is what advertising is. It's finding ideas that drive growth.
Do you miss being at the forefront of those kind of varying degrees of clients doing kind of the strategy work? Because now you're with Mishcon for 16 years. You're not doing fresh strategy like you would be at a Kellogg's on a product launch or something like that.
Actually, I am. You know what? It's not what you'd think, because every time we bring in a new practice, that practice needs a conversation about how we're going to position them and what kind of ideas are going to be the go-to-market ideas, and how we're going to inculcate them with the right behaviors for a market which is the innovation economy, which is very different, let's say, from the hedge fund world. And the hedge fund world needs a certain kind of, you need to keep adapting how you present yourself to those worlds. Pitching to clients, it's exactly the same here as it was to a point when I was in the advertising world. You still need ideas. You more need the R&C stuff, and you more need the kind of the detail, the technical detail of what you offer. But putting together a presentation to win a huge mandate, you still need to make a really creative, I think, make a creative argument. And every day I'm challenged by, well, we're opening in another jurisdiction. That's a creative challenge. Or we're about to open a global capability center, back office stuff. How do you position that internally? Or there are 7 channels to get to our lawyers. Is it WhatsApp? Is it LinkedIn? We've got an internal communications challenge. So actually, at the heart of almost everything I do is a creative question. And being the creative person, if you like, not that other people aren't super creative, being the person who brings that together is still scary and exciting. And I find that people of my age in the advertising world have either left it because they've been asked to leave, or they're in Groundhog Day. Because actually, when you join a business like this one, the range of stuff you get to go through, you have to touch, and I touch operations all the way through to, and I bring in lots of clients and I work with clients as well. The range is way larger than an advertising agency, which I've been in management, was in management for many, many years. So I actually think it's opposite for me. And the reason I mention why the jurisprudence thing is because in my blood, Howard, I was triggered by apartheid as a kid growing up, and that's why I wanted to be a lawyer. I joined Amnesty International age 15. So in my heart, the flame of social justice is alive. And so being here, even though a lot of our cases are individuals and businesses and not to do with kind of the issues of the day, although many are, I'm still excited by that. That's almost as powerful, if not more powerful, than all the other things that I've developed along the way, which is called being interested in strategy and ideas and growth. If that makes sense.
Elliot, you said something that is something I've been studying, and I wanna drive in some of your thoughts, which is you mentioned perception with clients. You change the perception of the client, and I believe you were hinting or mentioning towards market positioning. And I would love to hear your thoughts on what it takes to change the perception of a client, because I believe clients buy perceptions. They don't buy just a law firm or a lawyer. They buy perception of what it brings, like security and a peace of mind and a sense of getting something done. You mentioned about being tenacity, and then somehow market position plays into that with perception. And I feel like the war of the AmLaw 100, 200 in the United States, it's all about perception, because all these firms are incredible firms, incredible lawyers. But as you mentioned earlier, it's like it's all plain vanilla, the way they communicate themselves, and there's no way they're differentiating themselves. So I'd love to hear your thoughts of how do you capture the attention of in the mind space, the perception of a client.
So that's a big question, and it has lots of elements to it. I think the first thing to say is that the legal industry is privileged to have hundreds of thousands of some of the cleverest minds on the planet.
For sure.
There is a reason why there is a premium on whether it's the dying hourly rate or whether it's on a fixed fee for a transaction.
Yeah.
There's a premium because some of these people are the hardest working, cleverest people you've ever met.
And I'm going to interrupt you real quick because I know this could be a long answer. Is what I would say is there's actions you can take, and then there's this perceived world of awards. There's this perceived world of rankings. Like Chambers is based in your country in UK, and somehow that creates perception. Does that play a part in it for you?
It does, and I won't do it too long an answer, I promise. The reason I mentioned the quality of the lawyers is because if you're a quality lawyer, part of you just says, I do the talking here. My work does the talking. Don't give me this BS around the positioning. Don't give me this thing around perception. Let me tell you the truth, Elliot. You don't get it. I'm just a great lawyer. Leave me alone. Let me get on with it. That's not a Mischon view. But when I've spoken at some of the big global conferences, I often get, yeah, well, that's all well and good for Mischon, but we don't need to do that. We've just got a really good name and we're global. Okay, fine. And then you ask some more questions, and of course it falls apart quite quickly because yes. So here's the second thing: when you're super bright, you don't believe people buy emotionally. Chris, you just mentioned emotional security. If you ask a lawyer to say, so what are they buying? They wouldn't be saying that. They'd be saying they're buying the fact that I sold their business for 2.7 billion, not 2.4, and all the terms, all the heads of terms were in my favor. It means I'm out in 3 minutes, not in 3 years, and all this other thing. They would just talk about the technical stuff. In reality, it's an emotional purchase in the same way everything else is. In terms of how you get a client to think something, it goes back to the truth. If you've clarified what the truth is of your difference and people buy that, then you're able to start communicating that. And in the case of Mischon, there was little communication before I joined. And so therefore people's perception was Lord Mischon, grandee of the 20th century. It's a private client firm. It's small. They're rinky dink. They do a bunch of stuff, don't they, for individuals and families. When you start to talk in a more grown-up way in different publications, different environments, and we chose the Financial Times from day one almost, then people immediately, without realizing it, are having their perception challenged. When you then start to bring to life, so there's an awareness point, Chris. How do you bring? Well, firstly, how do you change anyone's mind? You have to be aware of you. Awareness isn't free. You may get some PR, you may have a whole bunch of stuff like that, and you may have the rankings in directories. But when you choose to invest in changing perception, you have a tilt at it, you have a chance. So changing the perception from we're a private client law firm to a business firm, to a firm for the world of business, ridiculously audacious position, because actually that's a Clifford Chance, or that's a Linklaters, or that's a Latham's position. They're a law firm for the world of business. There's whatever they are today, 4 billion, 5 billion, whatever they are today. We're 400 million pounds, 600 million bucks business. Ridiculous. And at that point, we were a 50 million pound business. We had no right to be talking to the world of business in the FT. So that perception starts with clarity of what you're saying. It starts with where you say it. And then it's about repetition in many different ways. And so changing awareness is, if I'm the CEO of a FTSE or a NASDAQ or whatever big company, I read about you, I hear you on CNN, or I hear you on the Today program in the UK. I see some stuff on LinkedIn. I see some stuff in social. I have people, I'm invited to an event, or I'm invited to a conference and you're there. I have the rankings. I look at the directories. The whole smorgasbord surrounds you. We used to call it just, it's good old fashioned integrated communications. If you have a clear message and it is replicated in lots of channels, you have a chance over a period of time of changing people's perception. The thing you have to do is measure that. And every year since I joined this firm, we have done brand tracking. And at one point, the question was, is Mishcon de Reya law firm for the world of business? You go out to FTSE 250, you go out to your guys and they go, 8% say yes. 8 years later, 74% are saying yes. So it's not my numbers, but it's that. And that's the way to say to the lawyers, we got to continue. So you change it over time, and you change it by being clear what you want to change it to. Most of the reason why law firms cannot change the perception of their firm is because, one, they're not clear what they want to change it to. And two, part two of that is they can't get agreement internally because they're worried that if they change it, what would happen? And part three is they're not investing. Yeah. If you invest, you're immediately in a category of 1 or 2 or 3. You do all those things, you have a chance of changing. So directories absolutely play their role.
Sure.
but they're the rational side of it. There's always
Sure.
this vector of emotional and rational. That's the rational bit.
So you're dealing with democracies that can't come to agreement, and almost you're kind of talking about strategic plans and clarity, and it sounds like that's a wrestle in a lot of attorney agreements, which I would agree. Everyone's kind of fighting, and there's not a lot of cohesion. But it sounds like you guys were able to come together and make a cohesive strategic
100%.
agreement to move that forward.
100%. And we did. And then you don't go back every day to get approval. You then you double down,
Yeah.
and you keep going. And of course, look, I can't just go off and do stuff without sharing. We've just stuff with different partners. We've just launched a new version of our brand campaign. It's still about its business, but it's personal. But the films talk about, we find our edge at the edge of what's possible. And why is that a thought? Because the edge of what's possible is the kind of non-vanilla issues that we deal with on behalf of our clients, and about with the fact that we're comfortable at that edge. Doesn't mean we'll be edgy in the answer, but we're in that really, it's a bit like a Clifford Chance lawyer doing a massive capital markets deal worth 10 billion. We're doing weird stuff for really big clients and medium and small clients, and that is at the edge of what's possible, and we find our edge. Why is that relevant? Because that's about the commitment that we show to our lawyers, which to our clients, which is captured in its business, but it's personal. In other words, we're invested. If we're invested, we're more committed. If we're more committed, we're able to, at the edge of what's possible, do what's required, because basically we're breathing calmly. It's a bit like being in the last 3 minutes of a Super Bowl. We're cool because we're always at the last 3 minutes of a Super Bowl, and we ain't going to flinch. We're going to make the pass. We're going to make the fourth down or whatever it is, and we're there. And that is different, and that is the way we articulate it.
Yeah, makes sense. Quick question. Would love your quick response. You're trying to implement change within a law firm. They brought you in. That was one of your core roles with things you're doing. What's one of the hardest parts to implementing change in a law firm, would you say? And how have you overcome that?
You're dealing with incredibly intelligent, stubborn people. And anything that involves humans, especially really clever ones who think they're right, is tricky. Whether that's changing the way that you open a matter, or whether that's changing the way you need to think about serving your clients and looking more broadly beyond just the thing that you do. There is no silver bullet. The usual way that we do it, that I do it, is I find a small group of people. I explain what I think we ought to be doing. They start doing it. It's not a program, it's just a thing that we do. Those lawyers start saying, this seems good, X and Y is working, we're growing revenue. They start talking. I then get another group of lawyers saying, what are you doing with that group? Why aren't you doing it with us? I never enforce anything because it doesn't work.
Good.
So I want the jungle drums to be beating all the time so that people say, what's that? It's taken me. And so then the little bit underneath this is, in parenthesis, patience. And knowing that if you're right, good people will follow. It's taken me 7 years, and I didn't mind, for the vision or the mission that we talk about. We enable our people and our clients to shape the world's possibilities. That's what we say on our website. And that's all about whatever your truth is, Chris, whatever you need from this outcome, we're going to help you shape the world's possibilities. Not legal language, not technical stuff. Another part of the brand jigsaw. It's business, but it's personal, enlightened, tenacity. We enable our people and our clients shape the world's possibilities. Recently, our partners chose to incorporate that phrase in our core values. I didn't tell them to do that. And now those core values in perpetuity will be our core values. So it happens. And so you've got to believe that if it is right and you seed it with a few people, at some point, everyone will take it. But what you can't do is have a classic change management program, I don't think.
Yeah. So you build a coalition.
Do you ever kind of look at stand back and look at the entire industry and kind of like shock, like there aren't more robust people from the branding side of the business coming in and implementing change the way that you have at Mischon's?
Well, it's obviously good for me, and it's good for Mischon.
It's great for you, of course.
I sound interesting when in fact in reality I'm the dullest man definitely on this call, probably in any room at any given time. I think what I straddle is a bit weird, because I've run a business, because I've been client facing, because actually my craft skill is in brand and strategy, but it's also in action and implementation and the realpolitik of running a business. I think you need to find people that have that background rather than just simply the person that says, let's talk about brand strategy. And I think that's why you haven't seen more of them, because there's the other weird quotient, which I mentioned, which is I'm actually deeply invested in the power of the rule of law and deeply invested in the power of lawyers to do good things for clients and for society. That weird combination of believing in the rule of law and lawyers, understanding how a business works, and happening to have a craft skill in brand, you put those three together, it's not a coincidence that I'm doing what I do in a law firm. I've never had a title imposed on me. I've never had a job spec. I've written this up. My team is now built through the pillars I mentioned at the beginning. So you need someone who's pretty robust, who I think can intellectually stand their ground. And I think the problem in most law firms is that there's a prejudice towards the non-lawyers, the fee burners, whatever people call them, because frankly, a lot of them aren't able to, by design. They've almost been hired not to be able to challenge a lawyer or, more importantly, a partner. So the point I made at the beginning about the Legal Services Act of 2007, which came into force in 2010, enabling people like me to become owners, that is not about ego. That is not about money. That is about people going, you're an equal. When I say I think we should invest $2 million in The Economist or whatever it is, and it isn't that, but let's just pretend for a moment that's what it is as a content partnership. I'm not saying that as the brand guy. I'm saying that as a senior partner. So I think that combination, Howard, if lawyers, law firms, other law firms were prepared to invest in a quote unquote proper person who's robust enough to deal with and be seen as an equal to the other partners and the management board, if that happened, yeah, I am surprised, but I'm not that surprised, because a lot of businesses say, geez, leave me alone. I mean, if you're Latham's, you're like, do I need an Elliot Moss? I don't think so. We're fine. It's billions. It's growth. We just go and hire more partners. They're bringing more business. Simple. Now, I think the world's going to explode. I think we are on the precipice of the artificial intelligence revolution. Whether we all end up as kind of babies in capsules like the Matrix and we're feeding the energy with the supercomputer, who knows? Or whether there's something before that happens, and I really hope there is. You can't just sit there and go, it's all going to be the same, and it's ceteris paribus, it's all things being equal. It's just going to be, it ain't. And so there's going to be a really existential challenge for law firms. If there is an existential challenge, but still a lot of big AM law firms are going, yeah, thanks a lot. I'm still going to charge you $10 million for that transaction.
So, Elliot, you bring up a really important point. You talk about investing fee-burning dollars, which I love the reference, and investing it in content, just as an example you're using. And something that almost would probably be heresy in certain environments of law firms. You bring up AI intelligence and how that's coming. You guys are in the thick of, and your firm is an example of like private ownership of law firms, in the wave of private equity, which is in full force in Europe and coming to and is a part of the UK, and now it's coming to the United States. Growth equity, growth capital being infused in a law firm, most of them, not all of them, but most of them, not a Latham, but others are undercapitalized. And we're talking about real dollars to invest, to compete for client perception, market positioning. I'd love to hear just your quick, candid thoughts of what's going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years as these dollars are coming to very savvy management who realize, wow, now we can really double down on who we are or where we're going, or firms who realize that they could do that.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, and there's not a day that goes by here where we as a group of partners that aren't talking about private equity. I mean, we looked at becoming a public company. We were very close back in 2022. I was a key part of putting that story together and signing off documents at 4 a.m, which I never thought I'd be doing. But there you go. I was like a trainee corporate lawyer who found out how hard it is to run an IPO. I mean, that is brutal. But the serious side about raising capital and what you might do with it, we have to actively consider that, and we have to actively be clear that if we are undercapitalized, we could end up on the scrap heap, in the same way many other great law firms have done that. The difference here is that the consequences of failure are bigger now. I think when law firms went out of business, or they just disappeared and they merged or something, the market was more benign. I think the market of clients buying legal services is not benign. ChatGPT is at their fingertips. They can choose to use AI right either for an answer that's correct or that isn't. I think, and I'm just being simplistic about it for a moment, but I think there are some big decisions that all partnerships are going to need to make if they're going to not just thrive, but actually survive. I don't know the answer today. Me personally, I'm very interested in external capital because I think we're going to need it. I'm also interested personally in developing a Mishcon 2.0 next door, metaphorically, so that we can go play and start the firm, build a firm in a different way, rather than incrementally changing what we've got, which I think could take too long. You'd almost need to start again. We talked about doing that 10 years ago. You just go, literally, there's the door, right, what's in there? So if it's an AI first high premium advice, human advice second business versus being, well, we start with the high premium advice human thing and then we roll it in AI, I got a feeling we're going to have to do that. So I think there is a proper threat. I think mergers are defensive on the whole, not offensive. I think we are, never say never to any of these things, but these are active conversations. But I think the time frame has changed, and I think the consequences of not getting this right have changed as well. I think it's going to be more, we're going to see some serious fallout in the next few years. That doesn't mean we got the answers, by the way. I hope we're not part of it. But, in a way, we are all a bit Woody Allen here. We talk about it a lot. We all think the house is going to fall down every day, which makes sure, in a way, or stops us, from letting the house fall down. So there's a paranoia that's definitely a part of our psyche, which I hope gets us through to making really calm, strategic choices about where our capital is and how much we really need and what we'd use it for. Because that's the usual equity story. Having done this for the IPO, the equity story for your private equity partners is going to be, so how much do you want to raise, on what valuation, and what's the money for? Tell me about that. Now, that's really hard to do when you know that AI is fundamentally going to change everything, but we don't even know which platforms to invest in. We don't know how quickly it's going to change. There's a lot of unknowns here. And Nick West, our chief strategy officer, who's our kind of at the vanguard of what we think about here, he doesn't know the answers either. I talk a lot to Richard Susskind. He doesn't know the answers either. So this is not, oh yeah, you just need to put a brand on it. Oh yeah, you need to have a merger in America. I don't think so. This is not as easy. We are dealing with systemic ambiguity. And systemic ambiguity takes a really courageous set of people who are going to make some leaps, some of which will be wrong, some of which will be right.
Yeah, it's bets. Elliot, do me a favor. Please finish the sentence. The future is bright because
it is unpredictable, volatile, and out of adversity comes opportunity.
I love it. And Elliot, how can people find you on social media?
Oh, I hide, Chris. Nowhere. LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best place to find me.
Thank you, and I hardly believe that. And Elliot, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Really enjoyed talking to you. Great questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elliot. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Pleasure, Howard.